So, Andrew, we are living in troubled times. Times of plague, discord, chaos. I don't know if you read the papers, but it's pretty wild out there.
Yeah, that's not great.
And in these times of trouble, as we know as students of history, mankind has always sought order and authority in above the deities, the divine, the gods. And this is what it's gotten us. So with our limited roster of gods now in the current era, this is the world we get.
Right.
And you and I were discussing this recently. Why limit ourselves? We have had so many gods in our past. The Greeks, the Romans.
Let's go to the bench.
Miscellaneous. Go to the bench. They're still out there. Gods are immortal. They're still out there. They might be retired. They might be hanging out in Boca, but they are, in theory, available. And knowing those stories, they've got some impressive abilities, some wild tales. They've seen some stuff. So, as you and I have discussed, it's time to revisit that bench to see who's out there who might be able to save the day for us.
Right.
And that has brought us to this podcast, of which this is the pilot episode, God versus God. And so we'll tell you a little bit about what we're thinking here, listeners.
Right.
We've got a structure in mind. We thought in each episode, we're going to audition two gods. We'll draw them at random. Typically, let the fates decide.
Let the fates.
Yep. And each of us we'll sort of audition a couple of candidates who might be the god who can save the day for us.
Right.
We'll each take one of these gods as we draw them. We'll hear a little bit about their stories. And the stories get a little crazy.
Right. You might think you know these gods, but
it's probably been a while.
Yeah, the stuff that Edith Hamilton does not tell you. So
no, that's right.
Back in fourth grade.
That's right. And it's probably a little rusty if you're like me. When you blow the dust off, it's some pretty wild stuff. So we're going to look at their powers. We're going to look at their character, who would win in a fight, look at their it factor. And in each episode, we will render judgment according to a series of set categories that you have established.
Right.
And we will determine. And go ahead.
Speaking of judgment, we took some of our inspiration from the Judgment of Paris.
We did. The Golden Apple. Yes. And as I recall, the Golden Apple was the winner of who was the most beautiful. Is that right? In the Judgment of Paris?
Who was the fairest, right?
Who was the fairest? That's right.
Yeah. Paris, Prince of Troy, judged that beauty contest, and then picked Aphrodite and married the woman of his dreams, and I think lived happily ever after.
Yeah, no circumstances of any kind for anybody after that. There was
no blowback. So
no,
that worked out well.
Maybe the fall of Troy. Maybe the establishment of the Roman Empire.
Not familiar. And I think we should acknowledge, in addition to that, we were also inspired by some more contemporary sources.
Yes.
Other podcasts out there, such as Totalis Rankium, Grim Reading, Rex Factor.
Yes.
They do some rankings. We're going to do a little head to head, but they have some definitely some inspiration for us. And so, inspired by both the Judgment of Paris and Totalis Rankium.
Yes.
I think I'd like to be the first person to say a sentence in English. And I think that was the first time that's ever been said.
That's right. I'm just impressed you were able to pronounce that. I was a little worried for you, but you nailed it.
There you go.
So each of these weeks we'll present the Golden Apple to our head-to-head winner. Over the course of the season, then we will ultimately declare our victor and deliver what I assume will be, I don't know, the Golden Goat, some sort of prize upon a prize, or just a bigger apple.
The crypto apple.
Yes. Well, and the winning deity will have to somehow persuade to save us. So that may require us to do some sort of sacrifice ourselves. We know they're into that stuff, so we'll see. But that's it. Those are the ground rules. So welcome, Andrew. It's great to have you. Welcome, listeners. God versus God, episode 1. Shall we begin?
Yes, take it away.
All right. Well, since you are the originator of the concept, Andrew, I'd like you to choose who will go first. So before we came on air, we did each draw our winning god. Would you like to take the reins first, or would you like me to go first?
I think I'm going to let you take that honor.
Okay.
I'm really eager to hear what you have to say.
Excellent.
About this guy.
Excellent. Well, in our drawing, I was fortunate. I was able to draw Dionysus, who of course is the god of wine. That was great because I have been known to enjoy a little of the grape myself from time to time. Not tonight, got to be sharp for the podcast. But yeah, representing the harvest of grapes, he created winemaking. He considers wine not just to be a gift of Dionysus, but an actual symbolic incarnation of him on earth. It is how you embody the god. It's like drinking your own god, which is even better than some of the best wines I've had. So I was pleased with drawing him. He is also known for things like fertility, ritual madness, religious ecstasy,
right,
of which I have less experience.
So if you're drinking the embodiment of your own god, what is it? If you're drinking Boone's Farm, what does that say?
I mean, it's all about enthusiasm, which we'll learn about shortly. Right. Enthusiasm comes from the act of embodying whatever it is you're imbibing. And in my experience, it's rarely ended well after a night of Boone's Farm. So I guess you drink the god you deserve. Now, Dionysus is a bit of a contradiction, like wine itself. Now, he's often stereotyped as this kind of drunken buffoon, as depicted in say, Fantasia, the Disney cartoon. And yet, much of his religion focused on some pretty positive things, which we'll hear about in short order. But I was surprised to learn he actually focused in the religion on the correct consumption of wine, not overindulging, but the right amount, which I've always said I've also been very good at. Now, others have disagreed, particularly those who I am married to. But the power of easing suffering, bringing joy, the right amount of wine was Dionysus's real joy and real accomplishment in life. And yet he's a contradiction. He also, as we'll hear, he inspired a lot of madness. He was a pretty serious cult leader, but very powerful. He was the divine communicant between the living and the dead. He's known as the dying and rising god. We'll just hear in a second. He was born twice. And the idea of sort of dying and rising, resurrection. I don't know if you've followed any current religions. That's that trope.
It's still a big thing.
Still a thing. It's been used very effectively in later days. So he's a bit of a trailblazer, if you will. Yeah. So let's start with the origin story. So he was born twice. He had that rare feat. The first time he was sprung from the mighty loins of Zeus, of course, the god of gods, the original god of thunder, pre-Thor, the OG, the original god.
Right.
Known for many things, his power, his stature, but also his erotic escapades. And this story begins with that. So he initially, the first version of Dionysus, he had, we'll say we had relations with Persephone, who would eventually become the queen of the underworld. So already some pretty interesting parentage here. The god of gods and the queen of the underworld to be were his parents. Now, Zeus did not like to reveal himself during his erotic escapades. He was too much to handle. He was to handle the full Zeus would be more than anybody.
Never go full Zeus.
Don't want to go full Zeus. We'll learn in a moment what happens when you do. But in this case, he didn't want to do that. So he took the form of a serpent in his wooing of Persephone, which I guess from a mechanical perspective, I mean, a little scary, but just mechanically makes some sense. If he'd gone with, I don't know, hedgehog, something like that, probably less. The story doesn't end as well. Right. But he does that. He accomplishes the siring of Dionysus, and his child is born, and he's very proud of Dionysus. Zeus is. Takes his son to Mount Ida, just like he himself had been. He's got high hopes. He thinks Dionysus could be the ruler of the cosmos, could follow his steps, could be, again, kind of a proto-succession vibe going on. He's got an heir apparent. But as is often the case in these Greek mythology stories, there is conflict, and Hera
something happens.
Something does happen. Yeah, the best laid plans are laid differently. Hera appears on the scene. So Hera is, of course, Zeus's both sister and wife in some capacity. It gets complicated. Yeah. But it apparently kind of has the worst characteristics of both, because becomes very jealous, does Hera. Doesn't like the attention that young Dionysus is getting. So she goes to the Titans and persuades them to kill the child just days after Dionysus is born. Now, the Titans, those are the old gods, the pre-Olympians, like first chapter, like the Old Testament before the Old Testament. But apparently, like the gods we'll be investigating in this podcast, still around, still in retirement, still willing to dabble in a little infanticide from time to time. And so they take her up on it. And they before they kill young Dionysus, the Titans give him something called a thyrsus. So it's a stalk of fennel in order to mock him. So instead of giving him the scepter you would give a rightful king, they give him
some fennel.
Yeah.
Just kind of licorice.
Kind of a rough move. Yeah. I mean, not instead of this symbol of power, we're going to give you like a sort of a minor vegetable, kind of a salad ingredient.
Yeah, not a huge fan of it, but
no, but a little bit of insult before the injury there.
At least,
so he gets
at least it's not kale.
That's right. It could have been worse until it does get worse after he gets his hysteresis, because they don't just kill him, they tear him limb from limb, do the Titans, which sounds shocking the first time you hear it. It's, they're tearing a baby limb from limb, but in the rest of the story, we're going to get used to that as a method of meting out justice. So the Titans take care of that. Zeus, the father, understandably kind of upset after this happens. This is his heir apparent. And just a couple days after his birth, the Titans pull him limb from limb because of his sister wife's motions. Right. So he does what any grieving father would do. Zeus takes the fragments of the heart of Dionysus and he puts them into a drink. I wouldn't have been the first thing I would have thought of, but he forms a beverage, which leads to his second birth. So already the god of wine, even in his before his second, and
he has become a beverage.
He's become a beverage, and he's just days old. So he's already kind of a prodigy in his field of choice. So yes, this leads to his second birth. So Zeus takes this weird baby heart beverage that he's concocted, and he's not going to give up. He finds Semele, who is the daughter of Harmonia and Cadmus. Now, Cadmus is the king of Thebes and the founder. Semele is a princess. She's mortal, so she's not a goddess, but apparently fetching. And Zeus was moved to give Dionysus round 2 with Semele. So he pursues her. She has a dream first in which Zeus appears. And in the dream, Zeus shoots a tree with a bolt of lightning. Now in the dream, the tree dies, but the fruit of the tree lives.
Okay.
So she's taking this all in before they've even met. Now, in the dream, Zeus says, even though I just killed that tree with my lightning, I would like one of those fruits. So he summons a bird to bring him one of the fruits. Now he's Zeus. He's not going to do it himself. So a bird takes care of that task for him.
Right.
With the fruit, he sews it into his thigh, holds it for a while, and then out of the thigh, a man emerges. This is all in the dream. And then she wakes up and she gets this feeling, like, am I the tree? Is this some sort of pre-prognostication of what's going to happen to me? So she tells her father, the king Cadmus, about it. Cadmus says, "Ooh, that's heavy. You do not want to make Zeus upset at you. You better make a sacrifice to him." But Zeus is a step ahead. He shows up before she can even do that. He appears in her bed. Zeus, again, being a bit of a randy type. And again, he becomes a serpent because, worked the first time. And after what the text referred to as a long wooing, he is successfully able to make merry with Semele. Now, not only that, but after that act, the bed chambers are overgrown with vines and flowers, and the earth laughs. So talk about like a post-coital special effect. Like that's heavy. Zeus does not go halfway. So successfully, Dionysus is reborn again, or at least in her womb. But Zeus informs her, he says, the good news is you're going to have a son. He's going to be immortal. He's going to be able to make mortals forget their troubles. You shall bring forth joy for gods and men. So great news for Semele. She's very happy. The wooing will bear fruit in more ways than one. So Semele does what a mother-to-be who's that happy will do. She dresses herself in garlands, wreaths of ivy. She runs barefoot in the forest whenever she hears music, kind of perhaps the first hippie, I think you could say. And just as things are going well again, who comes back but Hera? Again, Zeus's sister and wife.
Yeah, she hasn't forgotten.
Well, she's not happy. She thought you had this figured out the first time. So the Titans get this guy out of the picture. Well, she's got to come back for round 2. So she's thinking she solved the problem. She's jealous that Semele will become the queen of Olympus instead of herself. So she is not just jealous of Dionysus coming back, but she's jealous of Semele. So she goes into disguise, takes on the guise of an old woman, of an old wet nurse, as one does at the time. And kind of just Hera gets Semele jealous and says, I knew him first. You're just a fling. This isn't going to last. And Hera says to Semele, I think you should try to get Zeus to show himself, to show him the full Zeus, as you said before. And Semele is understandably a little hesitant, like, I don't know, you're not supposed to do that. And it's never really happened before. Yeah. She's, no, I think you should. If he really loves you, he'll let you do it.
That's
and Zeus.
Test.
Yeah, and Zeus comes back, and after Semele makes the request, he's in a good mood. He feels he saved the day. He says, okay, I'll do it. I'll give you the full Zeus, but I got to warn you, no one's ever seen it as I've held my lightning bolts. So he does. And she's gazing upon him. And it can't help it. She reaches out to touch one of the lightning bolts and is immediately burned to ash just at the moment she touches the lightning bolt. Now,
boom.
The child she's carrying, which will be Dionysus, survives. Zeus rescues the child from the flames, even though his mother is now deceased. And what does he do? Well, as the dream foretold it, he sews the child into his thigh and holds it around for a while. Ultimately, he releases the child from his thigh, giving birth, if you like.
Right.
And just like the dream, Zeus is now both the father and the mother of Dionysus. He both sired him and carried him around. So ultimately, because Zeus carried around, had this burden, gave him a limp, gave even the great Zeus a limp. And that's where we get Dionysus as a name, because it actually means Zeus limp, which is again, a little harsh, because how would you like to be named after the side effects of after delivery? I mean, it's the equivalent of if you had been named 2 months of bed rest and no epidural. Like, that's just, nobody wants that.
No, it's not
so
good.
But you start to see where the story comes from. The god of wine comes from being planted, reborn, the power of the gods of nature. It's all there in that origin story. And Zeus, I mean, to his credit, he probably planted that dream in her head, so she knew it was going to happen, but then he played it out perfectly. Now, in the end, in the second birth, across both of these births, a lot of characters look bad. Hera, with her jealousy, with her disguises, the Titans for tearing a baby apart in retirement, Zeus for his kind of questionable erotic activities. But in the end, the good news is we get Dionysus. So he grows up, he lives, but he becomes a bit of a wanderer, Leighton, or is an adult life. He's a hero, he's a conqueror, he founds cities. I mean, he's still a god, he's still very powerful.
Right.
But he is moved by his origin story to be all about the wine. So he teaches people about the harvest, teaches them about wine. It's kind of like a proto Johnny Appleseed, just going from town to town, teaching them about
Johnny Grapeseed.
Yeah, Johnny Grapeseed. He's like a gentleman farmer. He's very farm to table. He supports small business.
Did you ever come across that nickname, Johnny Grapeseed?
I'll have to go back to the text on that one.
Okay. We may have started something.
I'm sure in Greek it sounded quite lovely.
Yeah, very different.
So, but because he's the wanderer, he's something of an outsider. So he lives on the road. He struggles for acceptance, and every time he comes back home to places like Thebes, where he was born, he doesn't get the kind of respect that he thinks he deserves from his fellow gods. So because he gets this lack of recognition, this lack of respect, he ends up getting a bit of a temper, as you can imagine. So he goes back to his hometown, eventually, after all these adventures, back to Thebes. And his cousin is now the king. And his cousin's mother, the aunt, both refuse to acknowledge that he's divine. So Thebes is going fine, but he's not getting the kind of respect he wants. So Dionysus comes up with an unusual new technique. He punishes his aunt, the king's mother, by driving her insane. And in that condition, his aunt kills her son and tears him to pieces. Now, Dionysus does none of the above. All he does is just cause the aunt to be insane, but she kills the king and does it Dionysus style, tears him up. So kind of like a mob boss, really doesn't do the deed himself, but he knows just what to do. Could
someone rid me of this?
That's a real shame if something would happen to the king.
Yeah.
And sure enough, that's exactly what happens. So that's his first notion of his temper. From Thebes, he then goes to Argos, and there all the women in town love him. They see him as this divine being. They join in his worship, except for the daughters of again, the king, King Proteus, the establishment. So what does he do? He punishes the daughters who are not worshiping him by driving them mad. And in that case, in being insane, they then kill their own infants who are nursing at their breasts. So, again, those who love him, but those who don't, they pay the price. And then the third time, he then goes to the daughters of Minyas in the next town, and just for kicks, does the same thing, turns them insane. They kill their children, and then he turns them into bats, because you don't want to be predictable.
Yeah, the bats. Yeah.
Is
that how we get bats? Is that the origin story?
Another excellent question. I feel like the bats must have predated even this ancient tale.
This was something that happened. All right, this is.
But I'll make a note of that, because that would really be something. If if that was the original Bat story. So yeah, he keeps you guessing, but you see the recurring theme: tearing children to pieces, bringing them back to life again. And really, like many of us, you never get past your childhood. That's where you come from. And even if you get a good deal, even if you're set up and you have a good job, you're helping people, but ultimately the echoes of the past keep coming back.
Yeah, there's some trauma there for sure.
There is. So because of that temper, he's characterized as the raging one, the mad one. But in all these escapades, he does build quite a following. He's, it's not an exaggeration to say he is a cult leader. That's his job. And all these folks who begin to worship him, they start to practice the Dionysian mysteries, which involves sacrifices of goats, bulls, wooden masks, lots of drinking too, and some other things too. But obviously with the brand being the god of wine, the drinking is a central force of it. So I want to talk a little bit about this 3-day festival, because this is really, I think, describing Dionysus to a T. Originally started in Rome. So worth mentioning, of course, Bacchus is the Roman equivalent, right, the Roman version of Dionysus. The story, the true festival really begins there. In Rome, they did it 3 times a year. And it was restricted, this festival, to women. So very progressive for the time. Okay. 3 times a year. But later on, it became so popular, the Etruscan Greek version perverted that more inclusive process. It was men and women. It was all ages, all social classes. And it was just a big drunken sexual free-for-all. And rather than 3 times a year, it was 5 times a month. So they really upped the ante. They really knew how to spend a weekend. So, but it involved, as you might suspect, one of the big activities was pulling live animals apart and eating them raw in their entirety to reenact that first birth of Dionysus. But it gave followers the chance to practice what I mentioned before, enthusiasm. Oh, go ahead.
I just hope it's not pork. Hope they stay to it.
I will find out.
Chicken's also not good.
No, it's not in its raw form. That you would not, that would not make for a good weekend, no doubt. So they get to practice enthusiasm. So the god enters the body. They become one with Dionysus. The revelers do, and that gives us the term enthusiasm. So everybody who's an enthusiast, it is the equivalent of intense version of swallowing something so much you become that thing.
Wow.
Keep that in mind.
That's mind blown.
Yeah. So three days for this festival. The first one, they open the wine. They adorn everything with flowers, the vessels, the rooms, the children. And not only do they tap the keg, this takes it up a notch. They release the dead from the underworld to wander around for all 3 days of the festival. So we've been to some pretty wild parties back in the day, but I don't remember anybody evoking the dead to come out. And that's the first day. I mean, they don't even wait till the final couple of hours.
That's just kicking it off.
It's just starting strong. So that's day one. A lot of drinking, a lot of communing with the dead from the underworld, and just wandering around. Day 2 gets very solemn. They've got a ritual. There's costumes. They open up the sanctuary that they only use for this event. There's a ceremonial marriage to Dionysus, but also throughout, as you can expect, plenty of drinking.
All right.
And then day 3 is all about the dead. So it's their last hurrah. They merry-make. They have a good time. They pour the remainders of their drinks on the tombs of the deceased who they've been partying with, which I do believe gives us the origin of pouring one out for your homie.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is... that goes way back.
It goes way back. So they would do this, but then when day 3 was about to complete itself, there was a big ritual cry. They would yell, they would scream, they would essentially scream to get the dead back to the underworld. So the ultimate sort of closing time. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. You got to go back to hell.
Yeah, gotta get.
So, and that would cap it off. So it was very, very inclusive. There were the servants, the slaves even got to participate.
But this was 3 days, and they did it five times a month.
Yeah, so
if you do the math on it,
even with Roman numerals, that's a lot. You barely have time in between. Yeah,
it's a lot of raising the dead.
3 times a year, like that feels right. That feels like you could come back, let a few months go by. But the Greeks, they took it to the limit. Yeah. And everybody enjoyed it. So, but in all, when you think about all those parts of the ritual, it's sort of part, frat party, part Halloween, part wedding reception, part kind of Brazilian steakhouse, and kind of a weird church retreat, all rolled into one. And it went for many years, but ultimately, as times changed, the state in Greece pulled the plug. And in one of these events, they arrested 7,000 people all at once and executed most of them. So the party did not end well.
Where was that?
I think that was in Greece. So this was Athens, I assume, something like that. So eventually those proto-democrats had enough and realized it probably wasn't good for the country. So yeah, they executed all 7,000 or most of them. But importantly, the ideals behind this were really crucial. It was about transition. So, men and male sexuality at first, women's changing roles in society, the status of a woman's life. These were all parts of the ritual. So whenever life was changing, you would experience it through this Dionysus festival. So something kind of modern day and progressive about that, which I appreciate. And as a result of that, Dionysus is often depicted as kind of this a little bit of everything kind of guy. He's kind of androgynous. He's sort of male. He's sort of female. And he appears in many different forms. So he is all those things to all those people, like wine itself, I suppose. And I want to say one last word about his cult followers, because it's one thing to be a cult leader, but there's a lot of women who really were taking an active role in this religion. The term is maenads. They're the raving ones. They were the ones who really got into the state of ecstatic frenzy through dancing, through intoxication. Had these great outfits, fawn skins, and they carried the thyrsus, the fennel, the fennel sort of quasi scepter. They used that, and they used it for magical purposes. They could hit the ground with it, and water would come out. They could shake it, and wine would flow from the earth. And all sorts of power. Yeah, it was an ultimate tool. They could not be harmed by weapons. They couldn't be burnt when they were holding this thing. When they did get hot, they would wear snakes, just harmlessly. Snakes would be their garments, and the snakes would lick the sweat from their heated cheeks harmlessly when they got hot. So even though it was kind of a mocking move for the Titans to give Dionysus the thyrsus, in the end, these maenads, these followers,
they turned it around.
They did.
Turned it around on them.
But like Dionysus himself, they then kind of used that power for rather hot-headed purposes, which involved, as you may suspect, ripping people to pieces. So that always ends up coming around. I think the saddest one of that, the saddest example, of course, Orpheus, who was the legendary musician and poet of the time. His wife had died. He was mourning his wife, and the maenads, the Dionysian followers, came around and came across Orpheus. Now they're probably half in the bag because they were experiencing enthusiasm. And they say, Orpheus, why don't you sing for us? Entertain us. And Orpheus says, well, my wife just died. I'm in mourning. Well, he shouldn't have said that because he ripped him to pieces. Yeah. The guy's mourning his wife. He doesn't want to do a gig.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, torn to pieces. So it didn't end well there. And of course, they learned it all from Dionysus, from his dark side. But they were loyal from all accounts. They looked great. And they used fennel in ways that even the best chef, I think, could not really pull off.
A new respect for fennel. I did not
keep that for the next time you're dipping into some grape. Maybe a little fennel salad on the side might do the trick. Yep. So surprisingly, Dionysus has a legacy that continues to essentially, not quite to this day, but to relatively recent times. There were more modern pagans who up until the 1800s and 1900s would still have some of these rituals in private. The Roman Liberalia, which is kind of the original version of the Dionysian festival, just so happens is celebrated on March 17th, which coincides with another drunken revelry in our modern day. But in the good, I know in your area of Boston and mine of Chicago, there's still a bit of debauchery around St. Patrick's Day. But next time you have to confront that and you think these guys are really being a pain, just remember, could have been worse. They're not summoning the dead. They're not tearing animals apart.
They're not tearing people apart.
They're not yelling from the dead to come from the underworld. So in conclusion, you look back at Dionysus. He brought us wine. He came back and was born twice. Everybody loves a comeback, reincarnation. That tradition remains proud. A very modern sensibility. So we talked about women's changing roles, the idea of transition, being ahead of his time, and he had 2 moms. Or maybe even 3 if you count himself. So very progressive. And because of that, he has this androgynous appearance that I would think would appeal to the younger generation as well. So the cons, after all those pros, he was a cult leader. So probably a strike against him there. He did a lot of driving people insane and causing them to murder others, including their family members and kings. And as we described, he had a bit of a temper. So in the end, Dionysus, fascinating character. His pros, his cons, a complicated figure, but so is the grape that bears his tradition. And there we have it for Dionysus. So that will close out part 1 of the first god of our God versus God battle.
Right.
Why don't we take a quick break there, and then we'll move on to the second part, and we'll hear who you have. Sound good?
All right. Sounds good.
All right. And we're back.
The digital wheel of fate gave me Mars, who's quite a different figure. And as you may know, that is the Roman version of Aries. So I'm going to go back and forth a little bit between Aries and Mars. They're not quite interchangeable.
Right.
Aries in the Greeks basically were not real fond of Aries. Did not have a great reputation in Greece, but the Romans were a little bit more fond of Mars.
Warmed up a little bit, yeah.
Little bit more warlike. They liked their war. They were good at it, so they were a little bit more. Yeah, they were good at it. They profited from it, so that a little bit more on Mars. So I'm going to lean into a little bit more the Roman version, but I'll go back and forth a little bit because some of the best stories are in the Greek tradition. Like Dionysus, he's one of the big 12 on Mount Olympus.
Yes,
gets to sit at the big table.
Yep.
When all the parties going on,
That's
he's
right.
at the dais. He's traditionally known as the god of war. In addition, all these gods kind of had multiple jobs.
Right.
He was also the god of courage, the god of wrath,
the
god of battle lust, and god of panic.
Interesting.
So
courage and panic.
So he could basically give your side one or the other, depending on how much he liked your sacrifice. He said, all right, we can. You could pray for him to give your side courage, or pray for him to make the other side panic.
Okay.
So,
powerful.
Like almost all the Greek and Roman gods, he's depicted in human form, and for him, he's not the youth like say Apollo, or more androgynous like Dionysus. He's very much a man's man, usually with a short beard, or sometimes clean shaven, but in the prime of life is how he's depicted, which is probably like 2:30 on the Tuesday after your 25th birthday.
That sounds great. I was thinking it kind of reminded me of you and me on the screen right now. Just
right.
Trim beards, prime of our lives. Just
right.
Ultimate
That's
units.
Exactly.
Yes.
So personality wise, in Rome, Mars is very staid, very dignified, kind of, I think a kind of a Clint Eastwood type. Doesn't say a lot.
Strong silent type.
Strong silent type. He's going to get the job done.
Yeah.
While for the Greeks, their version Aries is kind of an out of control rageaholic. Just untrustworthy, more of kind of a bandit raider, and a bit of a whiner when things didn't go his way. So not great. He's believed to be a very old god. His traces of Mars go back very far into the past. Greek writing Linear B, which predated their dark age, so they had writing, they lost it, but there are references in there to Mars, and there's a lot of other kind of parallels that think, all right, this is the same guy, just over a different time. In terms of cults and rituals, not a lot going on with Mars. It wasn't a lot. I didn't find a lot of festivals, but there was a very famous temple in Rome called Temple of Mars Ultor, which is a good name.
That's very
which
good.
is Mars the Avenger, and that was built not the comic book, but Mars as Avenger, and that was built by Augustus after he said for a battle with Cassius Brutus, the assassins of his father. He said,
Yes.
if you let me win this, Mars, I will build you a temple, which he did. It took him like 30 years to do it. I think he was maybe running out the clock. So, maybe if I have to do this.
Had some contractors who were a little slow.
Yeah. It was just, a lot on his plate. And there's also a famous one in Athens. So, in terms of how he was, soldiers were obviously the biggest people who would invoke Mars and often, as more of a transactional before a battle, like here's a goat. If you let me live,
help me out.
We'll call it square. So, but I did come across one interesting example of a small cult that was dedicated to Aries by a travel writer of ancient Greek named Pausanias, I believe. So he's writing about Tegia in Greece. And it says, there's also an image of Aries in the marketplace of Tegia, carved in relief of a slab. It is called He Who Entertains Women.
Oh, okay.
At the time of the Spartan War, when the king of Spartan made his first invasion, the women armed themselves and lay in ambush under a hill they called Sentry Hill. When the armies met, the men on either side were performing many remarkable exploits. So
we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, it's not. I think I take it that they were kind of at a bit of a standoff. So he goes on and says, the women, they say, came on the scene and put the Spartans to flight. Spartan king himself was one of the Spartan prisoners. The story goes on to say he was set free without ransom and swore to the Tegians that the Spartans would never again attack Tegia. Then he broke his oath, and the women offered to Ares a sacrifice of victory, their own account without the men, and gave the men no share of the meat of the victor.
Oh my. Wow.
So, and for this reason, he's called He Who Entertains Women. So.
I should say so. That worked out pretty well for the women, I'd say.
Yeah, a little bit. But I don't know if that was that. I guess they said, we're the ones who turned the battle, so we get the goat.
We get the goat.
We get the goat. So, I guess there's those kind of things around, but not a lot of them. He was also revered as the progenitor of Rome. He is the father of Romulus and Remus.
Oh wow.
So which is another reason why they might, put a little more respect on the name. I was like, oh well, he started us.
That's right.
And that might relate to his different image. So in terms of myths, traditionally Mars is son of Jupiter and Juno, and I believe he's the only son of that marriage, actually. However, I did run across another version of his birth, and this is from the poet Ovid, who will probably come across a lot in this podcast. And
absolutely,
it's a calendar-based poem that he wrote, which is an interesting takeoff from a poem called "The Fasti." And in that, he relates the story of Mars's conception. And this is from Poetry in Translation, which you can find online. Mars, too. So this is told by the goddess Flora, who is a goddess of flowers.
That would make sense.
As you might expect by the name. Yeah,
that's right.
So Flora says, she's the narrator here. Mars, too, if you're unaware, was brought to birth by my arts. I pray unknowing Jupiter never knows it. Which, if it's a secret, Flora, why are you telling all of it? I don't really.
It was a secret. Yeah.
Yeah, but he's not going to keep it. Yeah. Sacred Juno grieved that Jupiter didn't need help when Minerva was born. So it is another story. Minerva was, I believe, born out of Jupiter's head.
Yes.
And so
we have births out of heads. We got children out of thighs. I mean, this is
And so this one, so she was upset by that. Felt, pushed aside. So Juno went to Ocean to complain of her husband's deeds. Tired by her efforts, she rested at my door. So she went to the ocean complained to the ocean.
Yeah, I've done
Didn't
that.
get her anywhere. Yeah,
No, it rarely does.
doesn't help.
It feels good for a second, but no, it really accomplishes very little.
Yeah. So then she goes to Flora and tells Flora the problem, and Flora kind of tries to console her. And then this is Juno speaking. If Jupiter can be a father without needing a wife, contains both functions in a single person, why should I despair of becoming a mother with no husband? And chaste, give birth untouched by man. I'll try all the drugs in the world.
Oh, my.
So she's committed to this.
Kind of a modern would-be single mother there as well.
Yeah.
Who needs a man?
That's her take. And so Flora does, in fact, have something to help her out, but she kind of hesitates because she's, I don't know if Jupiter's going to like this. And if he finds out,
word's going to get around. Yeah,
and this is not going to be great for me. But eventually she comes around to it and she says, a flower sent to me from the fields of Olenus, which I don't know where that is, will grant you what you seek. Unique in all my garden. He who gave it to me said, touch a barren heifer with this and she'll be a mother too.
Oh my. I
did, and she was instantly. So animal testing,
powerful stuff. That's right. Yeah. Proto pharmaceutical stuff there. I like it.
Yeah. That tries it out. And then she after using it on the cow, she then uses it on Juno, and it works, and that's how you get Mars.
Look at that.
So there you go. So
Jupiter was kind of an absentee father, almost a.
He's not the father, actually. So,
I mean, was he the titular father? Did he raise him?
Yes. So so according to this story, he believes that he is, but he's not.
Okay. And word never got around.
Word never gets around that we know. Other than that, it just stays within this poem, which has been translated for 2,000 years.
Yes.
But that's not the traditional story. But I thought that was interesting.
Very.
Yeah. So which it may go into, since Aries was not that popular, maybe it goes into they didn't want to put that on Zeus, so that's a different way to do it. So there are a couple other myths that I'll just touch on briefly about Mars. The one is that he killed Adonis, famously handsome man.
Famously, the most handsome.
Yes, still known for that today, out of jealousy. Another one that he killed son of Poseidon, who was assaulting his daughter, Aries' daughter. So fair enough. That
probably had it coming there. Yeah,
and that was he was tried for that on Mount Olympus. And acquitted, and that is in Greek myth the first murder trial.
You forget that they had a legislative system in those days. There's so much in the way of just wanton murder. You really rarely hear about the scales of justice, but there it is.
Yes, yeah, that was the first one. And Cadmus, who you mentioned,
that's right.
He turned into a snake. He turned Cadmus into a snake because Cadmus had killed a dragon sacred to Aries. So kill a sacred dragon, get turned into a snake.
Yeah, it's not going to end well for you.
Yeah, and so since I mentioned the Judgment of Paris, in terms of that's one of our inspirations here. Mars was actually played a role in Paris being selected as the judge to award the Golden Apple. Prior to the Divine Beauty contest, Paris was to judge some bulls at a local festival, kind of a county fair type thing outside of Troy.
So he has some judging ability of some kind. He's clearly
yep. So and this is how we demonstrated it. One of the bulls belonged to Paris's father, King Priam. But unbeknownst to Paris, another of the bulls was actually Mars transformed into a bull.
Oh, wow.
So he transformed himself into a bull and injured himself in the county fair.
I hope he won.
And he did.
Okay,
he did
well, that's good. Because
that is how Paris was established as an honest judge. Because obviously Mars made the better bull than just an ordinary bull. But he could have just given it to his father's bull. Oh, he's the king. Father, nobody's really going to blame me. But he said, "Oh no, this bull here." And then
good looking bull here. Yeah.
this is prime. and he got the ribbon, and they said, and all the gods noticed that, and
here's our guy. Yeah.
Which I think is one thing that brings it was a different world there.
It was, yes.
This was considered
not really how it works today in many cases.
No, this was considered a big enough event that the gods took notice. So, but I mean, probably the most famous and most often depicted myths about Mars involve his affair with Venus, who was married to Mars' half brother, Vulcan, also known as Hephaestus, god of fire, blacksmiths, and stuff along that nature. Mars, by the way, never married. So this is adulterous on one side. It's for him. He's just a single guy.
Just a bachelor. Yeah.
So I'm going to give a little bit of this one. And this actually comes from the Odyssey. And I believe it was Odysseus who was retelling this story. So Helios, who's is both the sun and the god of the sun, notices the affair going on and feels obliged to tell Hephaestus. And so I'll go for the quote from here. And then Hephaestus heard the grievous tale when he went his way to the smithy, pondering evil deep in his heart, and set on the anvil block the great anvil and forged bonds, which might never be broken or loosened. The lovers might bide fast where they were. But when he had fashioned the snare, his wrath against Aries, he went to his chamber where he lay his bed, and everywhere around the bedposts he spread bonds. And many too were hung from above, the roof beams, fine as spider's web, so that no one, even the blessed gods, could see them. So he makes these spider web bonds, and then he announces very loudly that he's on his way to Lemnos. He says, "I'm going to Lemnos. I'll be back."
In case somebody wants to know, we'll be gone for a while.
Lemnos. Yeah, I'm walking, it's an island, so it's gonna take me a while. So, see you in a couple days. And everybody, all right, he's Aries hears this, says, "All right, I'm not even gonna put a sentry out. It's gonna take him forever to get to Lemnos." And he says to Venus or Aphrodite, "Come, love, let us to bed and take our joy couched together. For Hephaestus is no longer here in the land. He is now gone, I ween, to Lemnos to visit the Sentians of savage speech." And so I was like, I had to look up who are the Sentians. They're just kind of they're catching strays here, but I guess that they're kind of a piratey group. So apparently it was deserved. But of course, Hephaestus has the trap set. As soon as they're in the bed, the trap springs, and Helios tells him, it's sprung, and Hephaestus comes back, calls all the gods around, and says, "Look at this, look what they're doing." And so they all show up, all laughing and joking and making things, and then eventually I believe it's Poseidon for some reason who talks him into, well, you got to come down eventually. And the story ends, "Ill deeds thrive not, the slow catches the swift. Even as now Hephaestus, slow though he is, has outstripped Aries, for all the swiftest of the gods who hold Olympus. Lame though he is, he has caught him by craft. Wherefore Aries owes the fine of the adulterer." So then he had to pay a fine. There was a fine involved.
Oh, an actual fine. So he just had to write a check. Okay.
yeah. There's some
humiliation
sort of fine,
is one thing, but it's also going to hit the pocketbook.
Yeah.
All right.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So, and that's what I have on Mars.
I look forward to the Hephaestus chapter down the road.
Yes,
he sounds like a fascinating guy, because that was on one hand pretty crafty, but also kind of a jerk. I mean, really did
Yeah,
entrap
well,
him there. Like,
yeah. So yeah,
Interesting.
it was interesting. That's a famous one. There's a lot of paintings of that one. I think
bet.
when the website, I have get a couple up on there. So, all
But a lifelong bachelor. Fascinating. Well done. Very good. Well, that there ends Mars. Let's take a quick break, and we will get down to the judgment in mere moments after this quick break.
All right.
And we return for the final part of our program, the categories. So as we described up front, Andrew, we've got 5 categories.
Right.
We're going to go head to head for each of Dionysus and Mars and make a decision, or at least to have a discussion about who is the victor in each category, and the winner of the cumulative winner will take all in this round.
Right.
So we'd like to introduce the categories as they start.
Yes. We have the 5 categories, and they are Immortal Combat. And this one is very simple. Who would win?
Who would win? Classic childhood game. Spider-Man or Batman? Yeah.
Yes.
Was even back to
Tiger or a lion? Who would win?
Yep.
And then when we're calling curriculum deity,
yes,
and that is more of who has who would you rather be? Who would you rather worship? Who has kind of the best overall story?
Yes, the appeal.
Appeal. And then good God, which is who has the best character? Which one of these divine beings is, kind of lives up to the standards that we have today?
Yep.
Applying those standards. Who do we want to bring forward in time? And I think that's a big one.
Right.
Then iconography. Who has the best legacy? And in that, I think we're talking about both worshipers then, back in the day, and who's been carried forward into the modern era more. And then matinee idol, which is who would make the best movie or limited series.
Yes. It is the golden age of streaming. So I'm glad you mentioned the series. It's very good.
So, some of these might work better as a series. And I should say that this one we're lifting straight from Totalis Francium.
Pretty close.
Presidents.
Inspired by. Yeah. I mean,
very, very, very much inspired by. Yes. So with all that said, let's start our first category. Immortal Combat.
Who would win? I don't know that this is even a close one. I mean, if we're talking the God of War, you'd think he'd be pretty good at it. I guess you may not have said. I assume that he became the God of War, did Mars, by being good at it.
He is good at it, but it's interesting. So, on plus side, he has super strength.
Sure.
He can engender courage or so panic in battle. There are a lot of references to him having a spear and super armor. Like most Olympians, he can kind of appear anywhere he wants. He can turn into livestock at any time.
Yeah, that's good. He did. So he has weapons superior to a stalk of fennel, is what you're saying.
Yes, he does.
So he's probably gonna do better there. As powerful as the fennel was to be able to bring beverages from the earth and have snakes be able to lick your tears. They're no match for the God of War, I think there. Yeah. And he's probably acting alone in this battle. I have to think Dionysus would have surrounding him this Maenad group of frenzied women who were pretty impressive on their own.
Yeah, I would not want to face them on their bad side. I would have just played. I would have played the music.
I think where there might be a little wiggle room is that because Dionysus was so good at making people, just rendering them insane, that even if you were very skilled in the art of warfare, he could essentially theoretically make Mars insane and have him just tear somebody else to pieces. And
I mean that's the winery. We would have to know: is there an example where he turned a god insane? So that can he do that? And one thing I will say is there's a book called the Dionysica, which is an epic of Mars, and it's not widely available, not well known. It is about, of Dionysus, and it's about Dionysus conquering India. And so
Yes,
I tried to look into that, because Mars is sent out by Hera to stop Dionysus. Feud
Hera
still
again.
going.
Man.
Feud still going.
Interesting. Well, when you mentioned the India thing, that was, I think it was mainly associated with the Roman version with Bacchus, but he was credited with essentially conquering India on behalf of the Roman Empire, and came back on a chariot led by tigers with nymphs and all the rest of that. And did he leave India with his wisdom of how to make wine? I don't recall having an Indian wine anytime recently, so he may have cut to the chase there and just gone for the conquering, less on the agriculture.
Right. But unfortunately, I did. The only thing that I found is that Mars had battled Athena or Minerva, however you want to say it, in that, and he lost to her. And that actually comes up a couple times of Athena kind of kicking his butt.
So when it comes to God versus God combat, not a perfect record.
Certainly not a perfect record.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and it's interesting because Athena is the goddess of war, but she's more associated with strategy and
sort of a Billie Jean King, Bobby Riggs battle of the sexes, very early version there, and the Billie Jean figure wins.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I think I don't know, does the turning into a bull, turning into livestock, does that push it over the edge?
I think I gotta give it to Mars on this one. I think if worse came to worse, I don't have evidence that Dionysus was able to render any immortals insane. Turning into a bull is just a great trick to have in your pocket if you need it. And Dionysus really, for all of his powers of rage and agriculture, when it came to real combat, he kind of let other people do his bidding. I think in a one-on-one situation, I think I got to give Mars the benefit of that.
This is a one-on-one.
It is.
Make it, take it to 21.
You could show up with your entourage, but ultimately it's just you in the ring. So I think Mars takes the first round on that one.
All right.
You agree?
Yeah, I agree. I have the same one. So, all right. First round goes to Mars. Now, curriculum deity.
Yes.
And this is a combination of who would you rather be? Who would you rather be a follower of? Which is interesting. So those two might have some conflicting.
It's a split question. Yeah.
Right. All right. So you want to give it? Give it some thought on.
It's interesting. I at first blush, the idea of the god of wine over the god of war seems more appealing to my own sensibilities. I am, dare I say, a lover, not a fighter. And there's something appealing to that. I do, at least I have in the past, enjoyed a good multi-day social affair, as Dionysus clearly was a master of. So I think he takes my vote there. And I do respect to Mars, but a lot of the situations he's involved in, whether they're combat, entrapment in mode of adultery, those don't sound like my kind of cup of tea. So, due respect for the guy for living a powerful life and remaining a bachelor and living on his own terms and having, at least in some version of himself, that strong silent type. But I feel like I got to go with Dionysus on this one for all of his flaws, for all of his temper. He was a lot of fun, and I got to give him credit for that.
Well, so I would say on Mars, sort of, the good, super strength. It's nice.
That is nice.
You're perpetually in the prime of life. That's good. And the affair with Venus is a little bit, goes both ways. It's a love affair, but it's also kind of sad.
Very much so.
Yeah,
as you said, he'd have to pay the fine in the end. So
yeah, he did have to pay the fine. Not super popular. There was a section in I believe it's the Iliad where Zeus says, if you weren't my son, and then Hera kind of makes kind of a little side eye, and he says, I would throw you into Tartarus because you're such trouble.
Yeah.
So That's not, that's not super popular.
We all have
not
our
great.
childhood traumas. No one wants to hear that. Yeah.
Yeah. And he may have been a never nude. Because apparently all the statues depicting him, he had it. Even he was otherwise nude, he'd have his helmet on.
Is that right?
So,
okay. So yeah, not the case with Dionysus. A lot of statues where he is flapping in the breeze. He's out there
full on,
completely.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I got to go with you also. I think a lot of these there's going to be less bad. There's a choice of two.
Right. Yes.
It doesn't mean it's good, but it's not as bad as this one. So I agree with you on being I would definitely say Dionysus on that one.
Okay.
Though I did want to give this is one other thing. I don't know if this will sway you, but I did have a description of his mansions. He's got one. Mars has one mansion in Olympus, another one in Thrace. And Thrace is now Bulgaria or Bulgaria.
Okay.
Is, but
little country house, little getaway. Yeah.
Yeah, a little country house. So I'll give a little description of it. This is from the Thebaid, which is a epic about Thebes, which has come up a couple of times. So it says, barren forest Thrace, the sacred haunts of Mars, where on the slopes of Haemus Mountain, his savage mansion is ringed by 1,000 furies. The walls are of iron. Iron portals bear upon the threshold. The roof is carried by columns of iron. The rays of the sun are weakened when they meet it. The very light fears that dwelling, and its murky glare dismays the stars. Bent sentinels hold watch here. The outer gate, wild, passion leaps. Nephis or mischief, anger, flushing red and pallid fear. The insidia, treachery lurks in the hidden sword, and discordia holds the two-edged blade. It goes on like this for a while.
This is a great real estate listing for your country house.
I would not. So Statius is the poet. I would not hire him as my realtor.
No, definitely.
So that
not hearing about Western exposure for natural light.
Yes, the
open kitchen plan.
Fears to dwell. Yes, and all around were the spoils of every land. The captured peoples adorned the temple's high front. Fragments of wrought iron gates and ships of war, empty chariots, and faces ground by chariot wheels. Almost even the groans. Truly, every form of violence and wounds.
So I get the sort of spoils of war being your lawn decorations. That was fairly common, but the people, the faces,
that's grand.
I suppose it's a good security system. It'll keep people out, but
it's all in. Yeah, it's all in. And it doesn't say this, but I think if you picture that kind of throne room with fear and anger and everything, and then I think just to the left is a little alcove where he's got the ribbons from all the livestock county fairs he's won.
There's a little nook for that. That's good.
Yeah, he's off it. If you talk, and he'll break it. Oh, and I got this in Thebes, and I was a goat over here in Athens, and so
join me in the ribbon nook for a moment.
Yeah. You step out of this.
That's pretty good. That is impressive. That still sounds like a very creepy place, but but hats off for the unusual decor. Yeah,
but that doesn't change your mind.
I don't think it does. No.
Okay. All right. And then I think the other part of it is worshipers, and I kind of feel like if you're a worshiper of Mars, you're more likely you're going into battle.
Right. That was kind of a turnoff for me. I would have been very poor at that job.
So so I think we're both going with Dionysus on that one.
Excellent. So it's 1-1.
1-1. All right. Keeping the tension high.
That's it. Keep the audience on their toes.
All right. Good God. Character.
Who has the better character? Yeah, this is Dionysus is a mixed bag. I think he, for all of his help in helping deliver sustainable agriculture to all the towns he founded,
right.
and and for all of his progressive causes in inviting the lowest of society to his parties, in celebrating transitions of roles of women and men. It also did a lot of ripping people apart and or turning people insane so that they would. There's a big trail of blood behind him, so I think he scores some demerits for that.
Yeah, he's a little temperamental.
He was the rager. Yeah. So I think I consider him kind of a 50-50 when it comes to character.
Yeah.
Bit of a mixed bag. When he was good, he was great. And every time I have a sip of wine, I'm very grateful. But the insanity, the ripping of babies, you're going to lose points for that.
Yeah, definitely. So on the Mars side, again, kind of the Romans and the Greeks would differ. In Greece, he was portrayed as arrogant and actually somewhat cowardly. If it was at all a fair fight, he was not having it.
Interesting.
So he battles Hercules in one, and actually Athena helps Hercules out, and it turns aside, and he kind of whines about it to his father. He's like, this is not fair. The Romans, on the other hand, saw him more as a defender. He was also the god of peace treaties, in addition to war. So
that's good.
If I think the idea there being, if one of the sides broke the treaty, then his wrath would come down on the treaty breakers. The enforcer. Mars was also interestingly better with women than many of the other male Greco-Roman gods. His relationships tended to be consensual, which
is a plus. Yes, so better in terms of character. Yes.
So that is definitely a character plus. One's mileage may vary on the Venus thing. The one aspect of it is at least one of the stories, which will probably come across in the Venus episode or Festus episode. One of the stories is that Mars and Venus were in love before she got married, and she was forced to marry Hephaestus. So that gives it a little bit of a different color.
It does. So it was unrequited love until it was requited.
Yes. Yeah. However, his overall effect was to goad men towards war and rage. Sure. That's kind of his. If you're talking about the business he's in, the service that he performs, that's it, and it's not great. And I think that description of his Thrace mansion kind of brings home that too. So this is a tough one.
I think Mars gets the edge for me. I think the peace treaties, the pattern of consensual relationships, even though in this day and age, hopefully that's something of a given, but one never knows. And really, for all of even though there's a mixed bag on Dionysus, I still feel like he spent a lot of his time as a cult leader in these sort of 3-day drunken sexual escapades, which character wise fun for the time being, but when it comes to character, probably not the ideal.
Which is interesting because in the introduction you'd mentioned that he had at least one aspect was enjoying responsibly.
Yes, that's right,
but that didn't really seem to come out.
My sense is that he represented that himself, but his followers took that to the extreme, in the same way that you're told to enjoy Bud Light responsibly,
right?
But do they mean followers of Bud Light? Maybe a different story. Yes,
right. Yeah, yes, they certainly say it, but it's hard to say. I feel obligated to say this.
They do.
Oh man, this is a tough one. Man, I did not come in here thinking that I might vote for Mars in the good character one, but I think I'm going to agree with you.
Yeah. All right. So 2-1.
Yeah, 2-1.
Okay.
Hit the loser button on Dionysus.
That's right.
For that one. And then iconography.
Better legacy.
Yeah. Well, and so at the time, the Mars cult was only moderately popular. Again, especially in Greece and the Greek-speaking world. And for an Olympian, there's not a lot of temples that survive. Not a lot of evidence that the people were all about him at the time. However, his legacy, comes from Rome, and Latin, being language is very widely spread in the West, lives on in a number of things.
Sure.
He has, as you may have heard, a planet named after him.
He does. Yes.
Planet Mars.
I've seen it from afar. Yes.
Right. Yeah. And in Romance languages, the day Tuesday is named after him. So Mardi Gras is Fat Mars Day.
Yeah. Wow. I guess I'd forgotten that. That's pretty good.
So that's a good one. The male symbol is derived from Mars.
Really?
It is his shield and spear.
Excellent. Did not know that.
I did not know that until researching it. So that,
Quite the legacy.
That is quite the legacy. The behind the name, the names derived from Mars: Marcus, Mark, Martin.
Yeah.
Any Mar based name, Mario, which is actually one of the more popular names in the US these days. And this baby name website behind the name claims that there are 133 names in the US derived from Mars.
Excellent.
Obviously that also goes into Marcia, those sort of men and women. So that's a big one. In literature, he's a little bit less going on with Mars or Aries these days. Did the IMDb search for Aries god, and kind of the usual suspects: Clash of the Titans,
Sure.
that Wonder Woman. You may recall. I don't know if you've seen that, but the bad guy is Aries.
I'd forgotten that. When you mentioned the usual suspects, my first thought was, I don't remember him being in that. Now I know what you meant. Yes,
he was. Yes, he was not Kaiser Sose.
I was going to say. I mean, Kevin Spacey, also a lifelong bachelor. Also, some. Although, well, the consensual part, maybe they differ there.
Yeah, that would have been quite the twist if he'd been Kaiser Sose. That would have really changed. And that would be pertinent to our next round as well, but not the case. And in Assassin's Creed, there is a nasty terrorist group named the Cult of Aries.
That's pretty good.
So these are all things that are living on. And then I also did a search on Amazon for books, of the god Mars, and the one I came up with, or the one of the first ones I came up with, a God of War series book called "Come Here, Kitten."
That was not the title I was expecting.
No, it was not. By Amelia Rose, and has I think 379 reviews, 4.5 stars for "Come Here, Kitten."
Pretty good.
Yes. And I read the description, and it is actually, he is a character in the book.
He is. So, is he the kitten? Because we know he does have animalistic tendencies when he wants them.
Yeah, let me see if I can do a share screen, which won't really help the listeners.
Will not help the listener at all.
No, but maybe. So this, can you see that?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, so
I see.
Yeah.
So for the listeners at home, the covers of this "Come Here, Kitten" series, I guess, contains some shirtless individuals, a lot of abdominal muscles, a 6 or an 8 pack.
Yeah,
so it seems like probably an erotic thriller of some kind.
Right. Yes, starring Aries. So that
Very
is
nice.
Part of his legacy.
Impressive.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I was able to come up with. What did
And you didn't even mention the Mars bar of candy fame. You didn't mention Bruno Mars of music fame. I mean, where does it end?
Yeah,
well, I feel like this is an open and shut case. The cultural, the lasting effect of Dionysus is pretty lean. I mean, if you think about even Bacchus, you don't hear that. It doesn't come up in names.
No.
Now, wine itself, of course, has a lovely legacy that survives to this day quite well.
Yeah. So it brings up an interesting question, right? So,
that's right.
Are there accomplishments as a divine being part of that? So, do we give him credit? That would be a game changer.
That'd be a strong mark in his favor, but he loses quite a bit on the other side. So when it comes to literature, art, pop culture, the only two real examples that come to mind, of course, I mentioned before, the sort of drunken, buffoonish Dionysus character in Disney's Fantasia, who just is lolling around and slapping himself with wine. Right. It's kind of a caricature of the god of wine. And the second is even less impressive. Do you remember the album God Shuffled His Feet by Crash Test Dummies?
I do not. I remember Crash Test Dummies.
Yeah. So the album cover for the album, so the song, you may recall, was the hit single back in probably mid-90s. And the cover of that was I believe a Titian painting of Dionysus. Except in the album cover, the faces of all the characters were switched out with the faces of the members of this one-hit Canadian pop band. So not exactly the kind of weighty legacy one would hope for. Right. And that's kind of it. I mean, I think wine itself is pulling all the weight there.
Well, I would say, if we're looking back, he certainly had more followers back in the day.
At the time, that's true. So in his prime, that's true, until the Greek police came and executed everybody. And put much of an end to it, apart from the holdouts in the latter parts of the 19th and 20th century. But so they gave it a good fight. But yeah,
he had a little bit more there. And I do know in this name search that the name Dennis is derived from Dionysus. So
there's another one for the board. It doesn't quite match up to the Marios and Marcoses of the world, or the Marches.
No, it's not currently maybe it'll have a revival, but not.
I don't see that happening. Yeah. So I think I gotta go Mars on this one. It's kind of
a planet
case.
I forgot to mention the month, right? So the month of March is named for March.
So. Of course. Yes.
So I think iconography.
So you got months over here in days of the week, and you got Canadian pop bands over here. I think we got an easy one.
Yeah. And a segment in Fantasia, which is a great movie.
Classic.
Yeah, classic. All right. So it's standing 3-1.
Yes.
Dionysus cannot pull ahead, but in the final round, we can overrule the score if somebody kind of like. Good God wasn't like a clear great winner, so if somebody
it was a tight one,
blows away in a couple other categories, we could overrule it. So let's go to Matinee Idol.
Yeah, and I think this is an interesting one because I like where Dionysus sits on this one, because the scenes in which where you get his two births, where you get his driving people insane, all the children being torn apart, very evocative filmmaking, I would think. These are not the kinds of scenes that you see in a lot of films anymore. So they would be very action packed. The
30s were all about that.
That's right. I mean, it had its time, but
the Hays Code
it ruined it all for everybody. So I think there would be, and of course, any sort of drunken debauchery 3-day affair involving the spirits of the dead. You got sort of a horror aspect to it. You've got a bit of a Caligula aspect going on. So there's a lot of rich cinematic potential there. A tough one to cast though. And I thought about this, and I think, when it comes down to it, I would opt for Robert Downey Jr. because I think he has first a lifetime of experience with intoxicants. So he's got a lot of field research for at least the first several decades of his career. Has a bit of that sort of everyman. He's kind of a little bit male energy, a little bit female energy. He knows what it's like to be an outsider, as Dionysus did. He's driven plenty of people insane over the years, but he's lived to tell the tale, as Dionysus always did. So I think I would watch that movie of Robert Downey Jr. as Dionysus.
It's got a great origin story.
It does. And it really does feel like stories like the likes of which we don't much hear. So I like him in that one. With Mars, of course, you've got the potential of a great sort of, that the story of Hephaestus. You've got that love triangle. People love revenge stories. People love war movies, of course, but there's been a lot of those, with the sort of the Titan like sort of ancient style war movies. We've had a few of them, and many of them very
sword
good.
Sandal.
It's been done. Sword and sandals. That's right. So I like Dionysus in this category, if only for the sheer originality of that story on the screen.
Well, let me give you on the other ones, I didn't want to be kind of an advocate, but I can kind of give like the elevator pitch for Mars.
Sure.
So, it's a little hard to pin down. You've got 1,000 years of writing, so the characters aren't real consistent. Like if you think of like Batman from the 60s, and the Dark Knight, those are different characters.
Right. Yeah.
And that's only 50 60 years. So but these guys have 1,000 years of writing going behind them. So it's a little bit all over the place, but kind of narrow it down. He's a guy with a tough relationship with his dad. Like I said,
true.
Jupiter in the Iliad says, I'd basically send you to hell if you were my son.
Yeah.
And he might not be. So, that's some tension.
That's some drama. Yeah.
Yeah. Got some drama there. You have the affair with Venus, which you can play in kind of different ways. As I said, they were in love before they were married, but Juno promised her to Vulcan. Right. And so that broke them up. Even though they do have kids out of wedlock. Eros, Phobos, who's the fear, Deimos, and Harmonia, their daughter. Yeah. So that's okay. Which you have the other ones that are not so great, but have that. And then so it is in the Greek version, I feel like it would be kind of a villain origin story. Like he went through all this stuff and became a villain. And in the Rome, kind of the same kind of thing, but maybe more of an anti-hero origin story of how he, came to be this grim defender of Rome from the barbarians. So, but all that said, I do think that the Dionysus one, the story with Thebes and Cadmus and he's like, that's some high drama where he's like, do you believe? Yeah. If you don't worship me, I'm gonna do some crazy stuff. And I think the fact that there was, neither of us have really had a chance to look at it, but the Dionysica is out there. Somebody wrote a giant epic about him that says, there was an interest. There's a lot of story there. So
I wonder if it's been optioned by Hollywood. Maybe there's an opportunity here.
Yeah, that's I mean, I think all these elevator pitches were just declaring that they're copyrighted. So that's how that works, right?
As your lawyer, I affirm that. Yes,
I declare copyright.
You make a strong case, Andrew. That's not bad. I would watch that movie too.
Yeah, I think it's not bad. You have to kind of find what is that angle, but I think ultimately I'm gonna go with Dionysus. I think there's just a lot of really interesting places that I can go, and even this one with the origin story, it does have a little more of it has a little bit more of a formula than that, so it might be more commercial. This one might,
I think so.
You might be able to fit it a little more easily into the Avengers world, but that's not what we're about.
No.
We're about the art.
That's it. So it sounds like our first golden apple. Then it's going to go to Mars.
All right. So the score ends up 3-2.
Yes.
And with Mars winning Immortal Combat, Good God, and Iconography.
Yes.
And that would lead. And I don't think there's really any reason to overrule the categories.
I don't think so. I think it's pretty decisive, and and a good battle. I think, given his skills, I think Mars could be a really good candidate for helping us get out of this mess.
Yeah.
Which is the moral of the story and what we need in the end. So good candidate eventually with golden apple in hand, a good candidate for at the end of the season, potentially the golden goat. We shall see. With that, let us declare an end to episode 1 of God versus God, the pilot. Dionysus versus Mars. Mars comes out on top. Andrew, well done. Thank you for your efforts and your storytelling. I've enjoyed it quite a bit. We have a Twitter feed for this podcast, I believe. God versus God Pod, I believe is the handle. So look that up.
That's the handle.
I believe we're supposed to tell people to subscribe to make sure that they get wherever you get your podcasts, as you say.
Yes.
And a word of thanks to Andy Snow, who provided the music for this fine show. You may find him at andysnow.dj. Great musician, great local DJ here in Chicago, and a great man. So thank you to him for providing our upbeat theme to get us pumped up and ready to go every week. Well, let's let the theme take us out. Thank you, sir. And stay tuned for another episode next time, God versus God.
Yep. Bye.
Till then. Bye.